Amud Base, we've been learning about the laws of we spoke about Ma'amades, canceling Ma'amades, and we also spoke about Hallel and the Gemara that we learned on Friday. We mentioned that the Gemara had said that there's the opinion of our Mishnah about the doubling up of Bnei Parush, that family did the karbanetzim, the wood ceremony twice. That fit with the opinion of Rabbi Yossi, and it wasn't a contradiction. The Gemara, we explained why it's not a contradiction to Rabbi Yossi, because Rabbi Yossi never really said that Yoyov's family also came twice. He only said Yoyov's family, Yoyov ben Sri, only came once. And it's just that the question is, which day was the family, did that family come, but not that they came twice. There was an argument about which day, but not that they came twice. And that explained, that answered the problem, the contradiction that we had initially from the Mishnah. Then the Gemara had said that on the first day of Teves, there's no Maimed at all because everything is canceled. You have Hallel, you have Musaf, you have Korban Eitzim. There was 3 reasons to cancel all these extra prayers called Ma'amades. And the Gemara had asked, we had that's where we turned the page, about Mar Kashisha, the son of Rav Chizda. And we said that Rav Chizda had 2 sons with the same name, and the older one was called Mar Kashisha. It's an interesting thing to have 2 kids with the same name. But anyway, so for some reason, Rav Chizda had 2 kids with the same name. And he would call the older one Mr. Older and Mr. Younger, Mar Yanuka, Mar Kashisha. So the Mar Kashisha was the older one of Rav Chizda, and he asked Rav Ashi a very strong question. He says, like, why is Hallel cancels its own Maimed, the prayers of the morning, but it doesn't. But the Chavches Amud Beis, yes. We're on page, we just turned to 28. We turned to 28b, and we continued this question of Mar Kashisha that he asked about Hallel. Why is Hallel different than Musaf? Musaf seems to, at least the initial understanding was Musaf cancels Mincha, Hallel cancels its own Ma'amades, but Musaf doesn't cancel its own Ma'amades, its own extra prayers. It cancels the extra prayers later. That was a little surprising. Rav Ashi said, no, you understood it wrong. You had the wrong premise. Your premise was wrong. It's not that Musaf cancels Mincha and it doesn't cancel Musaf. It cancels both. Of course, it cancels Musaf. It also cancels Mincha. That was the meaning of the Mishnah. But then Mar Kashisha said, no, you understood me wrong. It's not that I understood wrong. You understood my question wrong. And then he explained his question that the Hallel seems to cancel the Shachris Ma'amades, which makes sense. It cancels its own Ma'amades. Musaf cancels 2. It cancels its own Ma'amades, the extra prayers in Musaf, and it seems to cancel also the Mincha prayers. It seems it's pretty clear in the Mishnah. It cancels the Mincha prayers as well. So why does it cancel 2? So Rav Ashi answered him, you have a point. There is such an opinion that it cancels only its own, and then it would be exactly similar to Hallel. So again, we have Ma'amades that are these extra prayers, and we cancel these extra prayers for the representatives that they would recite these extra prayers, but on days that it was that there were regular prayers had to be recited, so we just cancel out the Ma'amades. And according to Mar Kashisha, it should only each extra prayer should cancel its own prayer, and that was the understanding of Mar Kashisha. And Rav Ashi says, you know what? Rabbi Yossi also Rabbi Yossi holds that, so you can your way of thinking, your logic fits with Rabbi Yossi. And the Gemara brought a brisa that basically showed how Rabbi Yossi seems to hold that even a day that has Musaf, it still will have a Maimed. And how does it have a Maimed? It has a Maimed because it's only going to cancel its own. It's going to cancel Musaf, will cancel Musaf. But and if there's a Korban Eitzim, that day it'll cancel the mincha. But ultimately, ne'ilah, you could still have a maimed for ne'ilah because it doesn't cancel all of them. Our Mishnah doesn't hold that way. Our Mishnah follows the view that once if you have one of these special days that has all these prayers, Hallel, Musaf, Karbanetzim, you have all these extra additions, it's going to cancel all the Ma'amadis. Rabbi Yossi doesn't hold that way. Why? Because the logic of Rabbi Yossi is Hallel cancels Shachris. Musaf cancels Musaf. Karbanetzim cancels Mincha. Ne'ilah, you'd still have a Ma'amadis. Now, the Gemara had a problem because the Mishnah gave an example that the first day of Nisan does not have any Ma'amadis. And the reason why the first day of Nisan has no Ma'amadis was because the first day, I'm sorry, not the first day of Nisan, first day of Teves. Let me say that again. The Mishnah had said that the first day of Teves, there's no Ma'amadis. Why are there no Ma'amadis on the first day of Teves? Well, first day of Teves is obviously Rosh Chodesh. The first day is Rosh Chodesh. First day.
Hanukkah.
And yeah, it's Hanukkah. And you have Hallel, and you have Musaf, Rosh Chodesh, and you have also Karbanetzim, because it was one of the days that one of the families brought the wood ceremony. So you got all these holidays, cancel all the Ma'amadis, according to the Mishnah, right? The Rabbi Yossi would argue, but said there would be, if there's a Ne'ilah, you would have Ma'amadis. But the Mishnah says no Ma'amadis. Okay. The Gemara asks, what about the first day of Nisan? First day of Nisan is a day that has a karbanetzim. So we found the day of Rosh Chodesh. Not all Rosh Chodeshes had a karbanetzim, had this special ceremony of the wood, because they didn't always have, there weren't always wood donations. There were only 9 times in the year where they had these wood ceremony donation that was made into a holiday. And these 9 times in the year, 2 of them happen to be Rosh Chodesh. One of them is Rosh Chodesh Nisan, and one of them is Rosh Chodesh Teves. So the Mishnah gave an example of Rosh Chodesh Teves. The Gemara asked, what about Rosh Chodesh Nisan? It would seem that Rosh Chodesh Nisan should also be a day that should cancel all of the Ma'amadis. Why? Because Rosh Chodesh Nisan, what do you have? Number 1, it's Rosh Chodesh, so you have Hallel, you have Musaf, and number 2, it's also a Karban Eitzim holiday. So you have all 3 extra prayers that cancel the Ma'amadis. So the Gemara asks, that should be also mentioned, that the first day of Nisan is similar to the first day of Teves, and both of them cancel all the Ma'amadis. Why did it exclude? Why did it not mention the first day of Nisan? It only mentioned the first day of Teves. So Rava says, we see from here that Hallel of Rosh Chodesh is not the Oraisa. It's not biblical. And the understanding is that it's only a minhag. The Hallel of Rosh Chodesh, and this is a very big discussion, that, what is the obligation of Hallel on Rosh Chodesh? Now, so Rava says, we see from here, Hallel of Rosh Chodesh is not the Oraisa, it's not biblical, and therefore it's not going to cancel the Ma'amadis of Shachris, because what cancels the morning Maimed? Our Mishnah said that the morning Maimed is canceled if you have an addition to the morning prayer, which would be Hallel. But if Hallel is not biblical, then it would not cancel the Ma'amadis prayer. So it comes out that on regular Rosh Chodesh, it's not going to cancel the Ma'amadis. On Rosh Chodesh Teves, it'll cancel the Ma'amadis. Why? Because Hallel on Rosh Chodesh Teves is a Hallel not for Rosh Chodesh; it's a Hallel for Chanukah. It's both, but the Chanukah track kicks in. The Chanukah obligation is what is a more serious obligation. The Rosh Chodesh one is not as concrete, but the Chanukah one is a concrete obligation, and that will knock off the Ma'amadis of Shachris, the Maimed of Shachris. And then the Gemara goes through the dates of how many days do you say Hallel, what are the days of the year that we say Hallel, and it comes out with 18 days in Israel and 21 days in Chutz La'aretz, and the calculation was the 8 days of Chanukah you say Hallel, you have the first day of Pesach, you have the first day of Shavuos, and you have 8 days of Sukkot. So 8 plus 8 is 16. And you have the Pesach and Shavuos and Eretz Yisrael is 1 day. So 16 plus 2 is 18. You have 18 days of Hallel. And then in Chutz La'aretz, you have to add a day to Sukkot, to Pesach, and to Shavuos. And ultimately, 18 plus 3 is 21. So you have 21 days of Hallel, complete Hallel. Goimrim behem as a Hallel. You have the full Hallel on the on these holidays. I'm sorry, yeah. You have the full Hallel on these holidays in Chutz La'aretz outside of Israel. Those the 21 days. Now there are other days that we say Hallel, but it's not a full Hallel. What are the other days we say Hallel? Basically, generally on Rosh Chodesh, except for Rosh Hashanah, we don't say it. But on Rosh Chodesh, we say Hallel, and that those Hallels are half Hallels and not the full Hallel. And the other time we say Hallel is on Pesach, the last days of Pesach. We don't say Hallel, the full Hallel on. It's interesting. Sukkot, we say the full Hallel on all the days of Sukkot, but on Pesach, we do not say the full Hallel on all the days of Pesach. Anyone have any thoughts why? Why is Pesach less than
not less, it's different. It's one big yontif as opposed to 8 separate days of yontif.
So what do you mean by 8 separate days of yontif? Why is Sukkot considered 8 separate days of yontif, not
because
one?
You had a separate carbon. You had a declining carbon that went every day.
So basically, Isaac is telling us that the karbanos on each day of Sukkot is different. And because
15,
of that,
14.
It starts with 13 and
13,
it goes down
13, 12, 11.
12, 11. So the first day of Sukkot, the Parei Hachag, the bulls of the holiday go down in number, and therefore we consider each day a separate holiday. It's very interesting because the bulls of the holiday symbolize the goyim, and but because of that, they go down in numbers. Each day becomes like a holiday in its own right. I mean, those are not even the sacrifices for us. They're really sacrifices for the goyim, and they symbolize that the goyim are going to be destroyed. But each day becomes a separate holiday. It just comes to me the thought that maybe the holiday is that the symbolism of the Parei Hachag, the bulls of Sukkot that we bring, and the first day is 13, the next day is 12. It's symbolizing that the goyim are going to diminish. So maybe each day of the holiday is like it's a new holiday, because guess what? We only have 12 left. In other words, we've diminished the enemies, so to speak. They've diminished. And so maybe that's the holiday. It's just a thought that maybe like the holiday that each day is like a separate holiday is because the enemies are going to be diminished. It's like a celebration of the diminishing of each day of the holiday. Now Pesach, according to that, so Pesach being that it's one big holiday and it's the same sacrifice every day of Pesach. So therefore, it doesn't have any unique element that would cause there to be a full Hallel, because we already fulfilled the obligation of Hallel on the first day. However, there are other interpretations. The other but let's just stop here for a second. So according to this interpretation, that Sukkot has a different sacrifice every day, and Pesach doesn't. So what about Hanukkah? Why does Hanukkah get 8 days of why does Hanukkah get 8 days of the full Hallel if also Hanukkah is one big holiday? So
who said Hanukkah was one big holiday?
What it is? So why does each day get?
Who said Hanukkah is one big holiday?
Tell me why it's not. Why is each day a different holiday?
Well, each day you had a night of the candles continuing on, and at each day that's separate. Yeah, that's it. Because the Milchama was all the same for all of it. So it has to be the candles.
So it has to do with the candles, true. And one of the ways of explaining it is that the candles actually expand, just like there was a difference in the holiday of Sukkot. So here also the every day that the candles of Hanukkah lasted, it actually was a bigger miracle. So each day it's like the candle miracle was bigger than the day before. And therefore, each day is considered like a different holiday. Now, there is another interpretation, and that has to do with the fact that on Pesach, the day of the seventh day of Pesach really should be a special holiday, because the seventh day of Pesach symbolizes Kriyas Yamsuf. Now, because it's like a separate miracle, the splitting of the sea, that should cause there to be a Hallel, a proper Hallel, a full Hallel, because Pesach has an element of it that's like a whole new holiday. It's a major part of it. It's a major miracle, at least, even if you want to consider it a continuation, but it does have an element to it, that's unique. So yes, it's continuation of Exodus from Egypt and so on, but it does have the splitting of the sea. So one way of explaining it is that we're not going to give it full Hallel, because the angels tried to say Hallel, and Hashem said, "Ma'aseh Yodai, the work of my hands are drowning, and you're saying Hallel, and you're doing Hallel." So therefore, there is an interpretation that we also don't say the full Hallel on the Kriyas Yamsuf, on the day of Kriyas Yamsuf, because of that reason. And according to that, some want to say that would be the reason why Chol Hamoed doesn't get a full Hallel either. That even though Chol Hamoed maybe should get a full Hallel, but because the Shvi Shal Pesach is not going to get a full Hallel, so we're not going to make Chol Hamoed greater than the seventh day of Pesach, the miracle of the splitting, the miracle of the splitting of the sea, and then Chol Hamoed would be almost like a bigger holiday than the Shvi Shal Pesach. But basically, the understanding of our Gemara is that that Sukkot has reason. Let me mute everyone. Sukkot has reason to have a full Hallel. Hanukkah has reason to have a full Hallel. And Pesach, it's only the first day. And Shavuos is only one day anyway. So there's and it has a full Hallel. So that would be the number of the days of Hallel. The Gemara continues with this discussion of Hallel on Rosh Chodesh, that our Gemara seems to push aside Hallel of Rosh Chodesh, that it's not really a obligation. It's definitely not. It's not biblical, and therefore it's not going to push off the Ma'amados, extra prayers of the Shachris. It's not going to push, because it's Rosh Chodesh, and Rosh Chodesh doesn't seem to be obligatory to have much of a Hallel. Yes,
Rabbi.
Yes.
I'm looking about the two sons of Rav Chisda. So apparently, there's two different views.
Okay.
One is what we're saying, that there were two sons with the same name to differentiate them. The older was called Mar Kashisha, the younger was Mar Yanuka. This is according to Rashi and Kesuvos. But there's another opinion, which is from Tosfos and Bava Basra, which says that the two sons, one was, in order to differentiate them, Mar Yanuka, he was born when Rav Chisda was young, and the younger one was called, and the younger was called Mar Kashisha. I'm sorry,
Mar Yanuka.
Yeah, 1 second. The older two sons was referred to as Mar Yanuka, since he was born when Rav Chisda was young. The younger was referred to as Mar Kashisha, means old, since he was born when Rav Chisda was old, in his old age.
So why don't they just give them their names? And were they the same name? According to that opinion, were they both the same name also? Or
No, they have these names, but it wasn't named because they were the younger, they were the older. It was named because Rav Chisda was old and Rav Chisda was young.
Gotcha. But according to both interpretations, Rav Chizda had two sons that had the same name.
Right.
Which is interesting. Yeah. Okay. Thank you for the alternative interpretation of the name Kashisha, which means old, means this child was born when Rav Kashisha was old, and this child was born. I'm sorry, this child was on when Rav Chizda was old, and this child was born when Rav Chizda was young, or Yanuka.
Yeah.
Rabbi Lehavdil.
Yeah,
George Foreman had 4 kids, and he called them all George.
Uh-huh. I don't know who he was. I just know that the grill.
He was a fighter.
Uh-huh. 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 He was a fighter for the United States in World War II.
Yeah. No, he's a prize fighter, just like,
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
he had children, and he named them all. His name was George, so he named them all. George.
Right.
He was a fighter. He was a fighter for the United States in the Olympics.
Uh-huh. Okay, whatever it is. Anyway, Lahavdil. Thank you, Ezra, for the yeah. So the bottom line is that Rav Chizda had two sons with the same name. So that to me is a little surprising. I would like to see if there's any interpretation of why he would name two of his kids with the same name, and if there's any discussion about that in halacha.
I keep on looking. I keep on looking and looking.
That to me is more of interest. So far. Or did he forget when the moil was naming his second child, the second one? Did he forget that he used that name, or then it was too late? He already named it. I mean, there are options of changing names, but it's not common. So I wonder if that might be a source. No, not common. It's not encouraged. It's discouraged unless there's a real good reason. Because somehow the name is connected to the soul. So I'm wondering if maybe this might be a source of not, maybe the second one was named that by mistake, but they didn't want to change it because they didn't have a very good reason to change it. So therefore they just kept both with the same name. I'm just wondering if there's any discussion about that, and if that has any, if that is used as a source, why we try not to change a name if you don't have to. But anyway, okay, it was something to look into if anyone wants to do some research. Definitely sounds like an interesting story. Sounds like there's an interesting story there. The Gemara that we're going to continue, and then maybe we'll talk a little more about Halal on Rosh Chodesh. We're on page 28b, and we're at the story of Rav Ikla Lebavel. And Rav Ikla Lebavel is, let me tell you where we are. The last word on the line of the Gemara is Rav Ikla Lebavel. It's about 5, 10, 15, 20, maybe about 20 lines from the top of the page. If you are in the art scroll, let me tell you where we are. 28b. Rav Ikla Lebavel. 28b2. 28b2, the second paragraph. Rav Ikla Lebavel. Rav visited Bavel. He came to Bavel, and Babylon, in Chazinu the Kakaru Hallel Halila Reish Yarcha. He saw that they were reading Hallel on Reish Chodesh. Reish Yarcha. Reish Yarcha means Reish Chodesh. Yarach in Aramaic, the beginning of the month of the. And Savra Lafsukinu. He thought to stop them from saying Hallel. That was he considered what are they saying Hallel for? Wanted to stop them. Kivan de Chaza de Kamadalgi Dilugi, he saw that they were skipping. Amar, he said, Shmami no minagavisayhem biyodehem. This is he saw they were skipping 2 paragraphs. He said, I see from this that they're just doing a minhag. This is not an obligation, and therefore it is permissible for them to say Hallel. It's not a problem. and it's only a minhag avaseyim b'yadeyim, and that's why they're saying it. And the Gemara continues and says that Tana, Tana taught in a brisa, Yochid lo yaskel, an individual shouldn't start saying Hallel on Rosh Chodesh. Vim Hischel, if he started, Goimer, he says it. He finishes it. In other words, he started saying it, but he will finish it. It's interesting. The Gemara uses the word Goimer, which really makes it sound like it means he should say the whole thing. That's the common term Goimer. He finishes, meaning with including all of it, but that's not the meaning. It's a little confusing. That word Goimer normally is used to mean he says the entire thing. That's not the meaning over here. It just means that he would say the rest of the Hallel and not just not just stop in the middle. He could say the rest. Of course, he skips those two paragraphs that should be skipped.
So why wouldn't it say Yashlim?
Right. It's surprising. Again, it's a little surprising, the language of the Gemara. It's a little confusing, but it uses the word Goimer. Definitely surprising that it uses it. But Tosfos seems to Tosfos seems to that's the way they explain it, that it has to mean that. That in other words, it's just using the word loosely. There seems to be another way of interpreting these words. Tana Yochid La Yaschil Bim Hischel Goimer. I believe in the back over here they have another interpretation. This is the simple understanding of the Gemara, but there seems to be maybe another way of translating those words. That let me just see if I could pull it up. Some want to say that it refers to all of the 18 days that that you're supposed to finish Hallel, that an individual wouldn't say it with a bracha. But if he did, then he finishes the Hallel and he says it. So that's a Tosfos review the Chassid, that it says that Yochid La Yaschel. So then it comes out from there that there's question about an individual saying a bracha even on the days that you're supposed to say the full Hallel. It's a surprising opinion, but there seems to be such a view in Tosfos review the Chassid in the name of the Rabbeinu Hananel. Anyway, our Gemara has a Rabbeinu Hananel interpretation as well, that we're talking about Rosh Chodesh, Chol HaMoed Pesach, where you're not supposed to finish Hallel, and it's speaking about an individual that reads Hallel should not say it with a bracha, but if he did, he finishes the bracha and says the Hallel. But of course, on days that you're supposed to say the Hallel, then an individual would say it with a bracha. So in other words, what's coming out here is about the question of bracha, which we sort of touched upon on Friday. I mentioned that the real discussion is really not on the days that you're obligated in saying the entire Hallel, but really the days that you're not obligated in saying the Hallel. Should you say a bracha on those days? In other words, Rosh Chodesh, let's say, which our Gemara seems to be pretty clear that it's only a minhag. That's really where the question comes up about saying a bracha. But I will say that there is a discussion also that even if you're not supposed to say the bracha, if you did say the bracha, then comes another question. Should you finish Hallel with a bracha as well, would you say the bracha at the end of Hallel? Should you finish that? And maybe that would be the explanation of the word goimer. Bim hischil, if you said the first bracha, goimer, you finish the bracha at the end as well. In other words, that would really translate the word better. In other words, so the way we learned the Gemara, it's referring to simply an individual that said that doesn't say Hallel initially on Shvaidish, but if he started, he finishes, meaning he says the whole Hallel, but he skips out those paragraphs. But then there's another way of learning it that if he started with a bracha, he also finishes with a bracha, or another interpretation that that an individual started Hallel on days that you're obligated in saying the whole Hallel, even in those days he's not supposed to start, but if he did, he finishes the entire Hallel because those are days that you're obligated in Hallel. So these are some of the interpretations of the Gemara. Another final interpretation is if he started saying Hallel on a day that a miracle happened for him, so he's not supposed to say Hallel on such a day, but nevertheless, if he started, it seems like according to that you would be allowed to finish it, and but you really shouldn't say it. It's only if there's a problem with saying Hallel more often than you're obligated. There is some Gemara in Shabbos, I don't know, they don't quote it here, but there's a Gemara in Shabbos that talks about saying Hallel 2 extra days is called Macharef or Megadef. It's considered not appropriate, and there's a lot of interpretation to why that is, why is that. But anyway, these are some of the interpretations to our Gemara about Yachid shouldn't start, but if he started, he finishes. Ezra, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, just a point of information. I think Rev Yosef basically says not to during Rosh Chodesh is not to say bracha. That's the first thing, and during the Shalosh Regalim, we say ligmor et ha'alel, not likor et ha'alel, according as to the Nusach Ashkenaz for the full Hallel. And on Pesach, on the remaining days, we say likor et ha'alel, to distinguish it from the first 2 days when we say ligmor et ha'alel.
Right. Yeah, and Ashkenazic shows it's Lakroas Hallel all the time. But yeah, okay, that's a good point. So Ezra is telling us that in Nusach Sfard, the version in a Sephardic Siddur, the minhag among the Sephardim is to say, to publicize the difference between the two Hallels. And basically, you say a different bracha. If you're saying the whole Hallel without skipping, it's Ligmar. And that would be like on these 18 days or 21 days that we mentioned. But the extra days that you do half Hallel, you say Likrite. So that's a good point. And also about, Ezra mentioned about if a person doesn't have a minyan, is that what you said? If you don't have a minyan on Rosh Chodesh, then you shouldn't say a bracha at all. Is that what you said?
Well, no, I said that if on Rosh Chodesh, even if you have a minyan, Rav Yosef says not to say with the bracha.
Oh, even if you have a minyan, they don't say, even the chazan doesn't say a bracha, they just jump right.
Just go directly into Hallelujah. Yeah.
Oh, wow. And is that commonly done in all Sephardic shuls? Do they all follow that?
Yes.
Yes. Right. It's interesting. In Lubavitch, there used to be a minhag that the chazan says the bracha and has everyone in mind. And seemingly, it was like a chumrah, a stringency, that not everyone should have to say the bracha. Just one person says the bracha, and the rest of the people would be yoitze with amen. And in this way, in case there's any question of it being a bracha levatala, at least I guess it's only the chazan who transgresses, so to speak. Obviously, it's not a sin; it's by mistake. It's whatever, but at least it's only. So there was a minhag that it was just done by the chazan, but that seemed to change because for some reason there's a term used that the Hasidim jumped and would say the bracha, like everyone ended up, so it became the minhag sort of changed, and basically everyone says the bracha even on Rosh Chodesh. But there are people in Eretz Yisrael, or there's a group called the Brisk that they go around shul asking someone, could you be mitzi me with the bracha halal? Could you say it and have me in mind? Because they don't want to say the bracha, but you're saying it anyway. So why don't you just have me in mind? So it seems like the minhag of Brisk, I think, is to like get someone to be mitzi you. Yes, Mordechai.
Yes, I think that I think that the modern Orthodox congregations say Hallel on Yom HaAtzmaut.
Ah, okay, that's another discussion. Yeah.
Yeah, but
And
even
in fact, there's a joke about somebody who's modern Orthodox who asks somebody who's not, why don't you say Hallel on Yom HaAtzmaut? And the other person replies, Ben Gurion didn't say Hallel on Yom HaAtzmaut. The joke being that that he didn't do any davening, and therefore wouldn't have said Hallel.
Yeah,
Rav Yosef also says not to say with a bracha on Yom HaAtzmaut.
I think they said Yom Yerushalayim was a serious question, more so than Yom HaAtzmaut, because you're not celebrating a political entity, you're celebrating something.
Anyway, maybe at some point we'll look into these things. But in any event, let's jump to Shulchan Aruch over here. I just want to read from chapter 422. So in the Shulchan Aruch, it has the laws of Rosh Chodesh, and it says over here, the Koren Hallel. You read Hallel with skipping, dilog, whether an individual and whether a tzibur, whether a congregation. V'yesh, and some say that the congregation says a bracha in the beginning to read Hallel, l'kres Hallel, and if someone made a mistake and said ligmar, this is important, Ezra, for the Nusach Sfard, because it's possible someone could make such a mistake. We don't have a term ligmar, but if someone did make a mistake, the Ramah Paskins, you do not have to repeat it, because goimer is b'diavad. The word goimer is not bedavka, and someone who, in other words, it could mean just reading. Koire, it's lav davka means says every paragraph, in the term of the Chachamim at least. So it's acceptable if someone made a mistake.
Who assembled? I mean, Hallel is all from David HaMelech, from Tehillim.
Right.
But who assembled it?
Who established the
Who
wording?
assembled
Hallel?
those parakim to say on a special day, and was it Anshe Knesset Gdola, or?
It would seem that it's the Anshe Knesset Gdola, but it really touches upon the previous Gemara where we said that it's lav de araisa, that Hallel on Rosh Chodesh is not de araisa. So the question is, what does that mean? That all the other Hallels are de araisa? Where do they even have Hallel? David HaMelech was the one who made those poems, made these songs. So how could you call it daraisa? But then the discussion really is, well, Moshe Rabbeinu also made some of the, maybe David HaMelech just organized the Tehillim, book of Tehillim.
Right.
But really,
a lot of them he did.
A lot of them were.
There are 10 from Moshe Rabbeinu. There are some from Bnei Kairach.
Right. So the thing is that it seems that David HaMelech was more of an organizer, and the question is, so to what extent can we call the Hallel midaraisa? But seemingly the idea is da'araisa. In other words, the obligation of saying praises to Hashem is da'araisa. The actual wording of it in the would seemingly be more takanas hanaviyim. And that's an interesting point here, that we see that sometimes when the prophets organize something, we call it da'araisa, we call it biblical. That the prophets had established the saying of the prophets established the saying of Hallel. So that could be considered like a daraisa, biblical obligation. What's the difference if Hallel is biblical or rabbinic? The difference is what happens if a person is not sure if they said Hallel. Would they be obligated to repeat it? So if it's a biblical obligation, you would be obligated to repeat Hallel. If it's a rabbinic obligation, it's called a suffix d'Rabbanan l'kula. It's a question on a rabbinic thing. You could be lenient. So if you're not sure if you said it or not, that could be a difference if you consider it biblical or rabbinic. And it seems that the Takanas Hanaviyim, something is established by the prophets, that would be considered similar to a biblical and have that stringency that you would need to repeat Hallel if a person forgot or is not sure if they said it. Now, the Shulchan Aruch over here again. So it says that the first opinion in the Shulchan Aruch was that you say Hallel, even an individual. And you say Hallel, you skip the whether an individual or a tzibur, both opinions say it. But it doesn't say the bracha. Now, the other opinion is that tzibur makes the bracha likra as a Hallel. And at the end, you say Yahalalucha, which is also a bracha. And the Yachid, an individual, doesn't say a bracha. And then it says, Yeshayimim, even a tzibur doesn't say a bracha, not at the beginning and not at the end. And that's the opinion of the Rambam. And that's the minhag in all of Eretz Yisrael and its surroundings. And that's what the Beis Yosef, which is generally the opinion of the Sephardic Jews, so they seem to follow this, even though the Beis Yosef brought three opinions. And the first opinion is the first opinion doesn't say if you say a bracha or not. Second opinion says the congregation does say a bracha, but then he brings this other opinion, this third opinion, that even a tzibur doesn't say a bracha in the beginning or at the end, and that's the opinion of the Rambam, and that's the minhag in all of Eretz Yisrael and its surroundings. So that seems like, as Ezra told us, that seems like that's the final conclusion of in the minhag in the Sephardic shuls. Now the Ramah says Yeshayimim, even an individual says a bracha, and this is a Torah. This is based on the opinion of the Rosh and Rabbeinu Tam, and that's the minhag in these countries. Nevertheless, you should be careful to read it with a tzibur in order to say the bracha with the tzibur, with the community. You should say it with a minyan. And some say that when the Yachid reads it, he should have two people reading with him, at least the beginning of the paragraphs. They should read with him the beginning of the paragraphs. That's like a tzibur, that's like a rabbim, that's like a community. And two other people should say it with him the beginning of the paragraphs. And the minhag is to do that with hoidu, but not Hashem Hoshiana. This is in the Ramah. It's interesting. It's not commonly done, that at least that I've seen. If a person comes late, they just say Hallel. But the Ramah says you really should say the hoidu, or the minhag is to say hoidu with other people. And then in the Mishnah Berurah, he brings that because the main Hallel is on Rosh Chodesh, is only a minhag, it's not a halacha, so you don't say a brach. That would be the reason not to. Let me mute everyone. That would be a reason not to say a bracha, because it's a minhag, which is our Gemara. Our Gemara said that the Hallel on Rosh Chodesh is only a minhag. And we saw that. Rav said, "Oh, it's a minhag avosenu b'yadeinu," and therefore that would be a reason not to say a bracha. That's the reason for the Sephardic Jews. Some say that even an individual says a bracha. That's the Ashkenazic minhag. That's based on that's the Ramah quoting from the Torah. Even though it's only a minhag, we do find that many things that are only minhagim, and we say a bracha. Nevertheless, an individual should try to say it with the tzibur to fulfill the opinion of the that a individual doesn't say a bracha, and therefore you should say it with the tzibur. And if you come late to shul, this is a halacha important to know. If you come late to shul, the authorities say and they're saying Hallel, you should say Hallel with them and afterwards daven. And even if you're in the middle of Psukei de Zimra, the beginning part of the davening, where you're allowed to interrupt for certain interruptions, so you should even stop, and it's not called a interruption if you're saying Hallel. And nevertheless, you shouldn't say the bracha, but you should be Yaitze with the Baruch Sha'amar bracha and the Yeshtabach bracha. And this is all Hallel of Reish Chodesh, because there's opinions that you shouldn't say a bracha. But the other days where you say the whole Hallel, everyone agrees that you should say the bracha. So in the middle of Psukei de Zimra, you shouldn't stop and interrupt because you don't want to lose the opportunity to recite the bracha on the Hallel. Therefore, just say it individually. And then it says that you should have two people say with you. So when you say Haidu, they should answer afterwards Haidu. And the officially, when you say Ana Hashem Aishiana, they should say also Ana Hashem, but the minhag is by Haidu, but not Ana Hashem Aishiana. Haidu, it implies more that others should answer. Ana Hashem Aishiana doesn't really imply that you're telling others, so it became a minhag not to. Now the Achrayim write that there's no difference between Rosh Chodesh and other days that you finish Hallel. All cases, you should always do this with other people. And the fact that the Ramah says, oh, then it's like a community, what it means is that on Rosh Chodesh there's more of a reason, because then it's not a problem about the brachas that you said. But really, this should really be done at all times. But if you can't have two other people, then you don't have to run after them. You're yaitza. Now, where is this applicable? This is applicable on the Seder night. On the Seder night, people think, oh, let me just finish off. I finished all the Haggadah. We had our meal. Let me bench, and we'll do the we'll finish off Hallel. But really, you're supposed to have, like, the head of the Seder should be reciting the Hoidu Hashem Ki Tov, praise Hashem, because he's good. Kili Olam Chasdei, forever everlasting is his kindness. And the other congregants in your Seder should be answering to that, to that request. Let's praise Hashem, and they should answer, yes, Hoidel Hashem Ki Tov, Kili Olam Chasdei. So in other words, even in when you're saying it, and even if you're going to say it anyway, you should really say it with a group, with other people as well, and they should participate in the interaction of these the stanzas that are supposed to be responses to the, it's supposed to be done in a way that there's a person saying it and the other person is responding to it. Yes, David.
I found something else with old Mar and young Mar.
Oh,
so before we were saying that the addition of the Tosfos, so it was saying that the one called Young Mar was born when Rav Chisda was young, which makes him actually older.
Right.
So so he also says there that the seniority of Young Mar is indicated by the fact that he's mentioned first when the Gemara quotes the two brothers together.
Mm.
And then he adds at the end of this whole discussion, because somebody wrote Rabbi Aaron Moss a letter that he accidentally named two sons the same Hebrew name. One was named Chaim Leib, and then years later they had a son, and his Hebrew name was Chaim Leib, and apparently it was after two different grandfathers. One grandfather was Chaim Leib on one side, and one was Chaim Leib on the other side. They forgot. So anyway, he gives a source at the bottom of the whole thing. And he says, I don't know if you want to look this up, Likutei Sichos, volume 17, page 474. And I'm not sure what's being discussed there, whether it's the discussion with young Mar and old Mar, or it's the thing about two names.
Uh-huh.
Volume 17, page 474.
Uh-huh. Does he say anything? Does he tell him about changing the name? Does he mention that?
Yeah, he says that he says what you should do. He says you could either change the name, or to avoid having to do that, you could just refer to one as Chaim and the other one as Lev. Then you don't have to change the name,
Uh-huh. Interesting.
because it goes according to what he's
Right.
called to on a regular basis.
There's a very famous story, or maybe a legend or a joke, where the husband and wife come to the rabbi and they say, we're having a big we have a big fight of who to name the child after. So the rabbi says, so tell me who, what do you feel? So the father says, well, I think his name should be Moshe, after my father, Moshe. And the wife says, I think his name should be Moshe, after my father, Moshe. So the rabbi says, what's the problem? Name Moshe. You don't understand, she says. My husband's father, oy vey, what a type of guy he was. Oy, oy, oy. And I don't want to name him after my husband's father. And so so the rabbi says, wow, this is a big problem. I have to think about this. I don't know what to do. So have to, give me a little time. He goes to his office, he thinks, and he says, sure. He comes back, he says, I figured it out. So they say, yes, what should we name him? So the rabbi says, I figured out the name Moshe. So they say, after who? After who? And the rabbi says, that we will find out how he turns out.
Rabbi, this is very interesting, because I was named David after my mother's father's name was David, and my father's father's name was David.
Uh-huh. Right.
My mother probably named him after her father. My father probably named him after his father.
Right. Okay, so the bottom line is we have our Gemara, which is a source of a big discussion here in Shulchan Aruch, which now we've seen where it all comes from. It comes from our Gemara, being that Hallel on Rosh Chodesh is a question, is a minhag, excuse me. And a minhag, there's a question, do you really say a bracha on a minhag? This is really the discussion here, because can you really say, Asher, Baruch Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, blessed are you Hashem, King of the universe, Asher kedeshanu b'mitzvahs, made us holy with his commandments, and commanded us to recite the Hallel. Can you say he commanded us to recite the Hallel if it's only a minhag? So the one way of understanding the decision here of how do you say, or when are you allowed to say a bracha on a minhag, or on things that aren't biblical, is based on the fact that the Torah does tell us, the Torah says, don't go away from the things that the rabbis tell you to the right or to the left. So if you have either a rabbinic law or a minhag that would fall into the category that you're obligated to follow the rabbis, and the rabbis say do this, even though they say as a minhag you should do this, but the fact is, if you would do differently, and it would be considered that you're transgressing what the Torah in Parsha Shoftim says, don't go away, don't turn away from what the rabbis tell you, then that's biblical, because it's in Parsha Shoftim. Don't turn away from what the rabbis tell you. So if this minhag is something that would fall into the category of loisasser, that you're obligated to follow it, and if you don't follow it, you are turning away from what the rabbis tell you, then that would be called a asher kedeshanu b'mitzvaysav. Hashem made us holy with his commandments, and commanded us with the prohibition of loisasser, don't turn away from what the rabbis say, and therefore you would be obligated in saying a bracha. You could say a bracha on a minhag. if the rabbis established this, if the rabbis established such a minhag, then you would say a bracha on this minhag. However, if you hold that this minhag is not, you wouldn't transgress loisasur, that if you go against the minhag, you would not be transgressing the prohibition of loisasur. Maybe you're going against a different rule, like al titaish teirasi mecha, don't go away from the teachings of your mother. There is such a concept that when you have a minhag, it falls into the category of what it says in the books of Ksuvim, in the writings, al titaish terasi mecha, shma bani musar avicha ve'al titaish terasi mecha. I think it's in the book of Proverbs, if I'm not mistaken, or Ecclesiastes. But it's shma bani musar avicha ve'al titaish terasi mecha. So that maybe would be a reason to follow a minhag, but it's not from the Torah. Like al titaish terasi mecha is a pasuk in the Torah. So if the minhag is a person doesn't follow it, he would be transgressing the Torah law of don't turn away from the rabbinic commands. So then you would be able to say a bracha on it. But if it's only in the category of al titaish terasi mecha, then don't go away from the teachings of your mother, meaning your traditions, your customs, but doesn't fall in the category of loisasur min hadavar. You're not allowed to turn away from the things that the rabbis tell you. So if it doesn't fall in that category, then you can't say a bracha on it of asher kedeshanu b'mitzvaysav, that he made us holy with his commandments and commanded us. You can't say Hashem commanded you, and therefore you would not be able to say a bracha, and at least that would be an understanding. So here the question is a minhag of Rosh Chodesh saying a bracha, what would of reciting Hallel on Rosh Chodesh, would this be a case where if you didn't do it, you would transgress loisasur min hadavar asher yagidu lecha yemina smal? If you don't say the Hallel, would you fall into that category? And that seemingly could be an argument between the Rishonim, between the commentaries here in the Gemara. According to one opinion, you're transgressing that. According to the other opinion, you're not transgressing that. You're just going against the minhag. And a minhag doesn't fall into that category. So does a minhag fall into the category of loisasur or not? And this way, this would be the discussion, if you could say a bracha or you don't say a bracha. And it's interesting that the Sephardic people don't say the bracha, but the Ashkenazic people, Ashkenazim do say the bracha. And but we try to get around this problem of at least saying it with a minyan, because when you recite it with a minyan, it seems that our Gemara seems to conclude a yachid doesn't start it, but if he starts it, he finishes it. It sounds like a congregation is supposed to to say it in a congregation. That's seemingly acceptable more acceptable to have to say a bracha, and the individual would be more of the problem to say a bracha. Now Taisus over here talks about, my time is up. Okay, tomorrow we'll touch on Taisus.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Bye-bye.